Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden. We're also going to stick to the south of the country for this review, but we're going to go to one of my neighbouring counties actually, and we're returning to a brewery who you've seen me review a good number of beers from before, and this is one that I have to say I'm very curious about actually. For this review then we are going to go up to Blekinge county, to a little place called Karlshamn in the west of the county, and we're having a look at another beer from Brygghus, and this must be review number 6 or 7 involving this brewery if memory serves me correctly. But this particular beer is called the Galactic Boss. It comes in at 10% ABV and it's an Imperial Stout. So yeah, this is the first Imperial Stout that I've had from these guys since they started releasing the 440ml cans. So hopefully it turns out to be quite nice, and it's actually the second dark beer that I've had from these guys, if I remember correctly. The very first beer that I tried from Brygghus way back in 2016 or so, that was My Balalaika, and that was either an Imperial Porter or an Imperial Stout. So yeah, it's been a long time since I've had something from the darker end of the spectrum from these guys, but hopefully it turns out to be quite nice. It's mainly been IPAs and things like that I've reviewed from these guys over the last while actually. So fingers crossed this is another good beer. Always nice to return to Brygghus and try some of the other ones, and the main reason behind getting this one was that it was different from the last beers I'd had from them. Incidentally, this beer was released on the 1st of September 2020 as part of the Lokal Småskaligt assortment in Systembolaget. And like I said to you, these guys have been more prolific over the last little while, and they're, you know, every month or every second month there seems to be a new beer from them coming out through these local releases actually. But yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brygghus before, and no doubt you will see some more from these guys at some point in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Brygghus then, on to my brewery notes. So as I've mentioned to you already, Brygghus are based in Karlshamn in Blekinge in southern Sweden, and apparently these guys were the first microbrewery to open up in that county, and they have been going for quite a while. So the brewery itself was founded back in 2012 by Dan Magnus Svensson, Magnus Karlsson and Mikael Lundell. These three guys worked together in the same company, and you know, they got home brewing together, and then they entered a home brewing competition which they won, and this was what really kind of prompted them to go and start their own professional microbrewery as a result. So apparently Karlshamn has one of the deepest ports in Sweden, and it's also got quite a long tradition of brewing as well. The old brewery that was there was built back in 1883, but then the building was demolished about 100 years later in 1982. So the brewery that these guys have is in an old dairy mill near the harbour. The larger kit at the brewery has a 2,000 litre per brew capacity, and they've also got a smaller kit for pilot brews and things like this as well to test the recipes before they release them on the bigger market. But over the course of 2019 they started issuing shares, and this allowed them to invest very heavily in the brewery's infrastructure. They also brought in Ida Iverson as their new brewer, and she's been really doing some very interesting stuff, I have to say. But that year in 2019 they went on to brew around 100,000 litres of beer. They also purchased a distillery to expand their own spirits kind of section as well. I think it's gin, and they are looking maybe at a little bit of whiskey as well from what I remember. But in 2020 they had been planning to expand a little bit further. Whether that has happened or not, I'm not sure because of the whole COVID-19 situation. But anyway, as of October 2020, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 65 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and that number is obviously going to go up over time. But yeah, that's all the information I can really tell you about Brygghus. I've been trying a few beers from these guys over the last while. I think I've reviewed maybe 5 or 6 of them this year, and yeah, the other 3 that I've had recently have been IPAs. But if you do get the chance to try the International Haze that these guys did with the Heretic Brewing Company, then yeah, that one is definitely worth looking at. But they have been releasing a good few kind of triple IPAs and double IPAs and stuff like that over the last little while, and that was one of the main reasons I wanted to have a go at this one, was because it is an Imperial Stout, and it had a pretty good rating on Untappd when I took a little quick peek earlier on actually. So yeah, but that's all I can really tell you about Brygghus Niton. If you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that they have. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. I'll let you have a little look at the artwork before we open it up. As you can see, it's got a nice big lion on it. I'm not sure exactly what the significance of the lion is on this one, to be honest, when the beer is called Galactic Boss. I honestly don't know what the connection is there. Maybe to a cartoon character or something, but it looks a little bit like Mufasa or Simba, something like that, the style of artwork on this. But there you can see on the back there is Brygghus Niton. That is their symbol, the bubbles, which is pretty cool. There you can see Galactic Boss Imperial Stout, 440ml can this one, or sorry, 473ml can actually. So these guys are putting their beers in American pint cans, which is interesting. I didn't realise that that was what these guys did. I thought it was 440s, but yeah, this one apparently has lactose in it as well. So I'm curious to see whether this will be a sweet stout or whether it will be a more roasty kind of toasty thing. But yeah, 473ml can this one apparently, one American pint. So without further ado, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. The Galactic Boss 10% Imperial Stout from Brygghus Niton over in Blekinge. Yeah. Oh, this looks promising, I have to say. Certainly looks promising. Yeah, so that's about 2/3 of the beer into the glass. This is going to be a sipper, of course. When it's a big Imperial Stout, you are not going to, you know, you're not going to sit and session one of these unless you're Harry Meadows from Blue Nose Beer Reviews. You know, we always joke with him about some sessionable 18% Imperial Stouts and things like that. But yeah, make sure you check out his channel. Really nice guy and nice beer reviewer as well. But yeah, as you can see with this one, this is poured a lovely kind of big dark ebony rosewood colour. You could see there's about 1/4 to 1/3 finger of a frothy, very dark tan head on this one, but that's fading away to just be a very, very thin foamy layer. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there, and the head incidentally is now just a kind of dark tan ring around the very edge of the glass. So I like that. I really like how that goes together, but nothing particularly surprising about this beer in terms of appearance when you consider what style it is. So yeah, certainly looks pretty damn good actually. So yeah, nothing overly surprising about its appearance. Let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one. Really curious about this, as I said. Oh, that does smell nice actually. It smells as if it's going to lean a little bit towards a kind of sweet stout rather than anything else. It almost smells a wee touch smoky as well, which is quite interesting. That's very interesting. It almost does smell a wee touch kind of smoky or something. Yeah, this one's really interesting. Where to start with this beer? The aroma, this is lovely, I have to say. That's probably the best aroma I've had from a Brygghus Niton beer to date. So yeah, this one, it's... Where do we start? I mean, with this one, you do have a nice little bit of a kind of sweet, sort of bready character to it underneath, like a German sort of rye bread kind of thing, and there is just a wee touch of an almost smoky, rauchy type thing to it, and that's really interesting. I wouldn't have expected that in this beer. There really is just something that is a wee bit rauchy or smoky in this one. So yeah, nice kind of German brown bready base to the beer, like a kind of German rye bread. It's got that kind of sweet brown bready quality to it. A little bit of an almost kind of rauchy smokiness coming out of it. But other than that, you've got a hell of a lot of brown sugar in there. For me, you can smell that kind of very, very thick treacle molasses sort of thing. You've definitely got a bit of a sweeter caramel in there too, and some biscuity notes. But yeah, it's the thing that really surprises me about this though is the smokiness and the breadiness and just the way everything goes together. Of course, one of the things that you can do with these big Imperial Stouts is they tend to be quite long boils. You know, I'm guessing that this beer, going by the way the aromas are coming out in this, because that sort of almost smoky character, that could just be due to the caramelisation of sugars, so it could be a sort of 4 or 5 hour boil. that this one's had. I think it might be a very, very long boil beer, this. What happens when you have the boil that long is you get really high caramelization of the sugars, and they become a lot more kind of treacly and molasses-like. So, yeah, that's the big thing to watch out with this one. Yeah, so you get a nice little bit of you see there's quite a lot of chocolate to this one as well, so you can smell a bit of that kind of darker chocolate coming out of the beer, maybe a 70% cocoa. You also get a nice kind of milky element to it as well. You can smell the lactosey notes. The more that you smell of this beer, you'll see that there is a bit of separation in it. I think the sort of brown bready notes and the brown sugars, they kind of stick to the middle of the nose, but then when you take it in a bit more deeply, you start to get the more chocolatey elements out of this, and that's where the lactosey side of the beer is coming out as well. So underneath all of that bready stuff, if you take the aroma in very deeply, like that, if you take the aroma in very, very deeply, you really get a bit of that kind of, 50-60% cocoa chocolate note out of it. You do have a bit of a lighter, maybe 40% more milky chocolate in there too, like a kind of sweeter chocolate. But yeah, it's really interesting just how this beer is quite layered. I think the bread forms the backbone. On top of that you get the chocolate and the lactose and things. Then you've got the brown sugars, and it's the brown sugars kind of sitting in the middle of the nose that really give you that almost kind of smoky, rauchy type thing. It's really interesting how that how all of that goes together. On the hoppy side of things, you've got a little bit of earthiness coming out of the beer. You do get a wee touch of kind of floral and grassy character in there as well, which is quite interesting. Yeah, nice little bit of earthiness, like I say, but the hops in this one come across as quite smooth rather than anything else. So that's quite interesting. The grassy side of the beer, again, it's very, very smooth, but you've got some nice berryish notes to this as well, which is quite interesting. So yeah, take a little bit of time and just enjoy the aroma before you get stuck into it. I think the aroma of this beer is quite nice. The fruity side of this one, yeah, a little bit of juicy figgy quality, and right on the tip of the nose you do get a little bit more of that kind of blackcurranty, blackberry sort of thing. I do wonder if it's a wee bit of Williamette or Northern Brewer that's in this one. Northern Brewer from Germany seems that it could be a likely candidate. Eureka from America would be the other one that's going to give you some of these kind of blackcurranty, blackberryish sort of aromas too. But yeah, take a bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this one before you get stuck into it, but let's have a taste of it now and see how we get on. This one is the Galactic Boss, an Imperial Stout at 10% ABV from Brygghus Brewhouse 19 if you want to translate it into English, in Karlshamn in the western part of Blekinge in the south of Sweden. So yeah, let's get stuck into this one. Sláinte, skål. Oh yeah, that's nice. That is solid. Oh yeah, that is nicely done. What I'm going to say about this one is this is a very kind of straight up Imperial Stout. These days there's a huge focus on, pastry stouts and things like this. These big sweet kind of cakey stouts, Amundsen, Lervig are doing them, Omnipojo in Stockholm. A few of the Danish breweries are doing these kind of things as well actually now. But this one is a very, very good, this is a really very nice kind of classic Imperial Stout this. Ida, as I was saying earlier, Ida Iverson has kind of been changing the way that Brygghus have been doing a lot of their stuff, and she's obviously quite a talented brewer. That is a really damn solid kind of more classic Imperial Stout, I guess you could say. That's really nice, and that's a level above the other beers that I've had from these guys so far. Maybe the amazing, not the Amazing Haze, the International Haze excluded. This beer is up a level from the other ones that I've had from Brygghus That is really impressive actually, so thumbs up to Brygghus and Ida for this one. That's the best beer that I've had from these guys so far, although it's probably a competition between that and the International Haze in fairness, but yeah, this certainly is on another level compared to the other ones that I've had from Brygghus recently. And there's not been anything wrong with the other ones, but you know, this one really just stands out a lot more in terms of its quality and the flavour and things like that. This one is just, it seems as if it's a lot more kind of refined, I think, than the other ones, to be honest with you. It seems that the recipe is, it just works a lot better, I think, than the other ones did. So yeah, this one gets a thumb up from me. It's got a really nice mouthfeel to it as well. So where do we begin with this one? It's got a lovely, the transition of flavour you get in this is very, very nice. I mean, with this beer then, let's just try and see what we can do. Straight away with this beer you get that nice, you do get a bit of the roasty toasty black malt in a blanket in the middle of your tongue there. The lactose, of course, smoothens a hell of a lot of that out. So yeah, you get that, you can feel the roasty toasty black malt there in the centre of your palate, but then the lactose just kind of goes over it and smoothens the whole thing out. On top of that, you do get a bit of a, wee bit of a kind of brown bready quality there, which is quite nice, but it's nowhere near as prominent as the aroma would have you believe. This beer actually does taste quite different to what I was expecting it would. From the aroma, and sometimes you get beers that taste exactly as you'd expect, sometimes you get ones that just don't. But I have to say this beer is really just very, very well done. So thumbs up to Brygghus Niton for this. They've pulled off a really solid Imperial Stout here, as I said. But yeah, on top of that kind of smooth layer from the lactose, that kind of slickness that the beer has, you've got a bit of that kind of brown bready. You do have that kind of brown bready quality there. You will feel that this beer dries out the further that you go into the palate, actually, the further that you go into the aftertaste, sorry. But you get a nice little bit of a kind of slightly brown bready quality that just sits on top of that, but nowhere near as thick as you might think. As you go towards the back third of your palate, as I say, you get roasty black malts, a little bit of lactose, and then a nice little bit of a kind of brown bready sort of thing. At the very back of the palate you'll get a more grainy kind of bitter quality to this one, a nice kind of roasty toasty black quality to this one. But then yeah, as you move into the middle third of your palate, you feel that the beer, it just kind of goes down a little level. It feels a little bit thinner in the middle of the palate, but certainly not lacking in flavour. So yeah, that's everything's a bit more kind of compressed, I would say, in the middle of the palate. So underneath, yeah, a little bit of roasty black malt, then the slickness from the lactose, wee touch of bread, then you've got some nice kind of woody sort of flavour sitting on top of that, and on top of that you get the chocolate. So in the very, you've almost, the chocolatey layer, to some degree it almost feels as if it's a bit of a kind of charred, burnt chocolate almost. You know, maybe a high cocoa, like a 70–80% cocoa actually. Yeah, you get a lot of that out of this one. You do get a nice kind of more roasty toasty quality out of it as well, which is quite nice. So yeah, the chocolate in this one, it comes across as quite high cocoa, but in the middle of that chocolatey layer, if you like, if you go right into the centre of your palate, it does feel almost a little bit more kind of milky and chocolatey. The lactose kind of helps with that, but to me the lactose actually feels a bit separated from the chocolate. You start to get the more milky chocolate elements out of this beer the further that you go into the aftertaste, so it's quite interesting that. But then on top of the chocolatey layer, that's when you start to get the brown sugars out of this one, and that's also really interesting in this beer too. So yeah, the brown sugary elements for me are really nice. It's got a big kind of oily, it's the brown sugary notes you get out of this one, it's very kind of treacly molasses, like really highly caramelised. I really like that about it. It does have a toasty element to it as well. Like I say, the thing you're going to really notice about this beer is the roasty toasty elements to this one really push their way out a little bit more into the aftertaste, and I like that about it because it makes the beer just a little bit more old school. In a way it reminds me of the kind of nerd brewing beers actually. They come in very, very sweet, but then later on you do get that more roasty toasty thing. I wouldn't be surprised if Special B is one of the malts that's been used in this. There's just something about the way the roastiness comes out in this beer that reminds me of the nerd beers, and it's Special B, you know, that they use actually. Hannes from Nerd Brewing was telling me it's Special B that they use a lot of. But yeah, this is really nice in that sense. But yeah, in the middle of your palate there, you get the sweet caramel, but underneath it you can feel it sort of thickens out. It's the sweeter caramel in the middle of the palate, then it kind of thickens out, and you've got the more kind of treacly molasses notes in there. Then as you move further out towards the edge of the palate, it's definitely a little bit more kind of biscuity, like McVitie's digestive biscuity there. So yeah, the middle of your palate has a lot of layers, like I say, roasty toasty black malt, lactose, brown bread, then the chocolatey layer, and the chocolate kind of develops. It's got a bit of a kind of toasty element to it, but it becomes a little bit sweeter later on, and it's almost got a bit of slickness there as well. Then you've got the whole brown sugar thing as well, and the brown sugar layer is quite complex in this beer for me. And yeah, we've only described the malt base of this one so far. There's quite a few other things going on as well. But yeah, this is definitely a nice kind of sipper for me. I'm going to enjoy this one. Yeah, definitely going to enjoy this one. I'll be sharing this with my friend afterwards, but I'll get the rest of it out for the moment. Look at the head on that. You can see the head properly on this one now. That lovely kind of dark tan head. Yeah, about half a finger there. But yeah, lovely tasting beer. This one I know looks great as well. So on the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate you do get a nice little bit of a darker earthiness there, and you've got some nice roasty toasty black malty elements. But yeah, as you move further forward you've got a nice little bit of a... The earthiness does kind of smoothen out a little bit and becomes a bit more herbal, and as you reach the front corners of the palate you've got a nice little bit of kind of floral aromaticity to the beer. Then round the front curve of the tongue it's just a little bit lighter and grassy, but in fairness some of the floral character does linger there on the front curve of the tongue too, which is quite nice. I like that. Yeah, it's the hops in this one, the front edge of the tongue actually gets a lot wetter, I think, the further into the aftertaste that you go with this beer. One of the other things I'm noticing is that if you go to the front corners of your palate and then just move diagonally back, you will get a few kind of woody, you will get one or two little woody undertones out of this beer, which is quite interesting. I don't really get a nuttiness to this one though, and that almost kind of smoky character, so that almost rauchy type thing that was coming out of the aroma there, you don't get that in the flavour of this beer. But I've noticed that in a few stouts. It's things like that that make me want to take the beer sommelier thing and learn about the different, the individual names of the different chemicals. Of course, I studied chemistry as my first degree in Scotland and then in Germany, and it's something. I mean, I know a fair amount about organic chemistry and stuff, but the sommelier thing and knowing what each of the individual beer chemicals are, I think that could be a really interesting thing for me, from that perspective too. So I'd love to know what it is in these big imperial stouts that gives you that almost rauch malty type smell. Actually, I'd love to know the class of chemicals and things. But yeah. As I say, around the front edge of the tongue with this one you do get a bit of a lighter grassiness, and there's a wee touch of a floral quality in it as well. But in that front third of the tongue you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And yeah, the fruity side of this one is quite nice because it's quite wet, but at the same time it's almost quite slick. It's not big and oily in that sense, and that's really interesting how the fruity notes in this one develop. So as you take the beer in, you'll notice it does have a real bit of kind of juiciness to it. It's almost a little bit kind of plummy, to be honest with you. It does have a wee bit of a juicy kind of plummy note, and you'll feel at that towards the back of the kind of front third of your tongue, and you will feel the border between the middle third of your tongue and the front third of your tongue. You've got a really kind of toasty, it's almost like the kind of burnt edge of a cake. It's almost like the kind of burnt edge of a cake, which is quite nice. But then yeah, as you are in front of that, you've got a nice kind of big oily sort of plummy quality to it. Then as you move further forward you've got a wee bit more of a kind of juicy figgy note, and then right on the kind of front tip of the palate, that's where you get the more kind of oily berryish type quality of beer. Definitely some blackcurrant, blackberries, and as you go further into the aftertaste you can feel the roasty toasty thing from that border between the middle third and the front third of your palate. You really feel some of that roasty toastiness there, and also the fruity side of the beer starts to lean more towards that blackcurranty, blackberryish sort of thing. So yeah, take a little bit of time and just reflect on that. But the fruity side of this beer for me is really, really nice actually. And I would say that overall, compared to the other beers I've had from Brygghus Niton, this one just stands out a little bit more. This is a really, really solidly done Imperial Stout. So what I would say to them is, unless they're going to experiment with the recipe of course and play around with it a bit, it would be a shame if this does not stick around at least as a rotational beer actually. This would be a very nice Christmas release actually. This one, but yeah, I've really enjoyed this one. This is the best beer I've had from Brygghus Niton so far, along with the Amazing Haze. Depends whether you want a dark beer or a lighter beer, but yeah, this I think is a very, very nicely done, more old school Scandinavian Imperial Stout. Yeah, this one gets a thumbs up from me. Yeah, so I think we've covered the flavour profile of this one pretty well then. So, mouthfeel wise, this beer, I'd say it's actually top end of mid-body. That's one of the things that's kind of interesting about this, is it's got a very, very slick mouthfeel, and I think that keeps it in the kind of top end of mid-bodied category. Really slick, slightly oily in that sense too, and it works really nicely. You do get a bit of dryness out of this beer the further you go into the aftertaste, but mainly this is a nice big, it's a nice big, very slick Imperial Stout actually, and I really like how all of that goes together. So so yeah, on the how do we say? Yeah, on the mouthfeel overall, as I say, very smooth carbonation. The mouthfeel has a real slickness to it, but at the same time the beer feels quite clean and almost a bit wet. In terms of bitterness, I think this beer must be about 60ish IBUs. You've got a good bit of bitterness in the middle of your palate from the malty side of it, but you've also got a good little bit of an earthy, hoppy kind of quality in there as well. Some nice juicy sort of wet fruits coming out of the beer, and yeah, I do like how all of that goes together in this one. The way that everything just fits together in this beer, I think, is very, very nice. So big thumbs up to Brygghus Niton for this one. It's not the thickest of Imperial Stouts that you're going to come across, but I think it's kind of like an old school Scandinavian Imperial Stout, and it's something, I guess in some ways it's a bit of a novelty, because it's something that I've not had a lot of over the last little while. A lot of the stouts you get these days, pardon me, are the big kind of pastry stouts and things, but this is a really nicely done, more traditional Scandinavian style Imperial Stout, and it's turned out very nicely. Probably the best beer I've had from Brygghus Niton since they've started releasing these big 440ml cans. Well, this one's 473, but yeah. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This one was the Galactic Boss, a 10% Imperial Stout from Brygghus Niton in Karlshamn in Blekinge. Here in the south of Sweden. A really, really nicely done beer, this one, and if you get the chance to try this, I highly recommend that you do. The best beer that I've had from these guys so far, I think. But yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Brygghus Niton. We will no doubt return to these guys at some point very soon, because they're getting more and more prolific. But in the meantime, check out this beer, check out my other reviews from Brygghus Niton, have a look at everything else that's on the channel, and I will catch you guys very soon. Until the next time, Slange, Skål, cheers, make sure you check out Brygghus Niton. Skål.